But I am sure the audience will agree that you've done you've created a really comprehensive review of legislation, and you have really given us a very clear picture of where we are. And I think I would like to allow a few questions, not encroaching too much on the next panel. Are there any questions or comments? Yes? Do we have mics?
Justice Gafoor, my question pertains to one of the slides that you had up, pertaining to continuing training, continuing education of practicing mediators. You were pretty general in terms of your advice. It was one of the slides under recommendations. Fully cognizant of the fact that you don't represent any particular university or commercial entity, would you care to give some more specific guidance on, because it's a minefield out there, a few of the institutions or programs that are practicing mediator with some measure of experience can use some kind of online training that they would pay for, of course, but that can be useful in expanding and deepening their understanding of mediation theory and practice. Thank you.
Well, I'm grateful for the question, but I don't think it would be appropriate for me to necessarily steer anyone in a particular direction. I mean, there are a number of good agencies coming forward. A number of them are being certified by the board, and whether or not we're looking, as you mentioned, at online dispute resolution training, or trainers who come from overseas to offer training in this jurisdiction, or those who are based within this jurisdiction or overseas, I think that one would have to take it that if you are being duly certified by the board as a trainer or training agency, that it should mean that you should have a level of competence based on the material submitted to the board. As I've mentioned, the deficiency may arise in terms of whether or not that agency is truly doing what it has pledged it would be doing. And in a sense, that would be a challenge for the board, because we simply don't have the personnel and others to carry out those sort of monitoring and auditing functions. But it's something we've kicked around, something we've talked about, and to the extent to which certifying somebody should invest the general public with a level of confidence, I hope that is going to continue.
Thank you. One thing that he has brought to the fore is the necessity at this point, 10 years after, for the board to rethink and relook and revisit its structure and the legal and administrative framework within which mediation is practiced in Trinidad. We have another question.
Good day, Catherine Kumar from the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber. My question has to do, actually I wrote a question before the statement that was just made, and it has to do with any of these institutions coming under the purview of government ministry, or even under the judiciary, because you rely on funding for that. And the ability to be really independent as far as funding, to be able to take on the required number of staff, the experienced staff that you need to run these agencies and training and to run the board and so effectively. And whether we should not be proposing for these to be truly independent with its own funding allocated in the budget yearly and being able to do all the necessary hiring and everything that you need to do in a proper, well-run organization.
I mean, I think your observation, if I may say so with great respect, is very well taken. I mean, this is something that, has been the subject of some discussion. We've had a couple of retreats on it. The extent to which we can see the board continuing to expand its role, I mean, whether we go the direction of trying to seek reclassification as dealing with ADR comprehensively, or remaining, within the field of mediation. So it is something that has been, attracting some level of discussion. But the problem is that, funding levels do need to be enhanced, and persuading governmental authorities to support that isn't always easy. But, I mean, I want to remain optimistic that as time goes on, whether, whichever government happens to be there, that they are going to see the growing use of mediation both in the public and private sector. I mean, we've already seen an endorsement of that through the Ministry of Legal Affairs, but in the private sector also, that is going to be important, and hopefully the board is going to play a role both in those sectors and so on. So I agree that I think more funding is necessary. I think that perhaps an enhanced organizational structure is going to be important as well. And, you know, while we've looked at different models, we can see an organization grow incrementally. I think if you look back to the earliest roots of the board back in 2004, it was right that those drafters sought to see the board grow bit by bit. And I think that is what has been happening. I mean, even the Symposium over the last 5 years illustrates that point. The fact that if you look back to the very first Symposium held here, which is, I think, a one-day affair, as it were, relatively small, probably you had even smaller numbers. Look at it today. So we can see the board continuing to grow, probably in keeping with the way that this area is also blossoming.
Yes, and in addition to what Anthony has said, Dr. Ryan, in his recent report, No Time to Quit, recommended, for instance, for community mediation, of which I'm the executive director, that we be made a statutory authority. So I think it is moving in the direction that you've mentioned. Absolutely. Yes, one last question and then we wrap up so the other panel can begin. Is there any other? I can't see you, so, you know, there's a conspiracy against the people on the stage here. Okay, so then I think that is it. Can you join me in giving a rousing round of applause to His Honor, who did an excellent job in very limited time. Thank you very much, Anthony.
Thank you,
Thank you, audience.
Thank you, all of you.